Okay, this morning, what I want to talk about. Why did you do that?
You look nice.
I go to a film.
I know.
Phoebe's brother-in-law. So, but anyway, hey Richard, how are you? I want to talk about the idea of separation, and we have discussed this at length in the past, have we not? But I want to show you something that I'm beginning to see. The door that brought us to this place of the material world is the door that we created. And that's what I want to talk about. The whole idea of separation results in us having a sense of restriction. It restricts us in every way whatsoever. And the idea of separation is what proves that we have free will. Because free will means to make a choice without force. Free will, if there are no options, there's no free will. But if you are, one writer said, free will implies that we are able to cause something without being caused by something. We are, it's just another way of saying, make a choice without force. What I mean by that is, your choices are made not because you want to please me or anyone else. The choices you make are not made because someone manipulates you externally or influenced you in any way whatsoever. You make the choices based upon what you feel is right for you in the direction that you should take. Are you with me so far? Now, so the question quickly arises, I think, is where does this idea of separation come from? Well, what happened is if we can see ourselves as being a spark in the whole scheme of the light. I had to go to a funeral on Tuesday, and I had to do remarks at the funeral. And one of the things that I said at the end of the remarks was, regardless of the pathway you travel, all of us are on the same journey. And your pathway may lead you in a different direction, but the journey is the same, whether you realize it or not. And the journey does not have a destination in that it ends, but the journey has a goal or result, and the result of the journey is to become one with the light. Now, if the journey is to become one with the light, then, and we came from the light, then the whole idea of who we are has to be that our origin is the light. That's where we came from. So how did we get from being one to being many? How did that happen? And that is deeply implied in the whole concept of what you call the Elohim from the Hebrew, Allah from the Aramaic, or Allah from the Arabic. It all means the same thing, one yet many. So how do we get to that place where we lost the sense of oneness and preferred the many over it? And in order for us to do that, that implies selfishness. So if we have a choice to be selfish, it means also we have a choice not to be. And when we are not being selfish, then we do have a sense of being one. my brother's keeper type thing. We have a sense of we have a sense of not being separated from each other or from the light itself. When we're not being selfish. Selfishness have a tendency to build a fence around us as individuals in our own minds, of course. So how do we move from one thing to the other? Well, if we look at the whole sense of life as being a continuum, then it begins to make sense. I believe that, and I'm going to lay some premises out here, then I'm going to go back and walk to them. I believe that man created himself. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, and I know you're going to have you on the limb, but just bear with me. I also believe that when I say man created himself, anything that we created, that man created, is actually an illusion. And I'll get to that in a moment. Therefore, I do not believe that mankind exists at all. I believe it's just a figment of our imagination. Now, and then we walk up to that. Bereshit bara Elohim. In the beginning created Elohim. In the beginning, out of the womb of beginning, came one but many. That's Elohim. So all of us were, if you can imagine, this spectrum of light, this huge ball of light, and we being in that ball of light had operated. When I say we, I'm talking about thoughts, individual thoughts, but one thought, yet one thought. And the decision was made to separate from father and mother, right? Now, how was this decision made to separate from father and mother? I believe that when the scripture talks about the man being put to sleep, that it's actually talking about the concept of deep meditation and creating those things that he desired. When I say he, again, I'm very limited with language, even though I don't mean he in the sense of, individual people, okay? I think it was just a deep depression. And I'm sorry, not depression, deep meditation. And he depressed into deep meditation. And those things that he contemplated, those things that he meditated upon, are the things that came out of him. And what I mean by that is that when you look at the formation of everything that is the sun, the moon, all these physical things are the things that came out of this deep state of meditation. And the desire to separate from father and mother means that he desired to, or the thoughts desired to be creative entities on their own. And when you look at it from that perspective, then you begin to see that mind becomes brain. When I say mind becomes brain, it's a continuum that moves from the concept of the mind being, let me say it this way, individual atoms that began to condense until it becomes what we call solid in terms of a brain. Can you see that?
So, did man put man's self to sleep in the meditation?
I think that the concept of Elohim creating a man, I think Elohim went into a deep meditative state, separate from Jehovah, the Father. And in this deep meditative state, he saw even though he was one, he saw the many avenues of thought. And these many avenues of thought is what resulted in the creation of man. And the reason I say that is because
For ticketing purposes, the call has terminated. Please contact your moderator in your
you cannot from the perspective of an atom, it talks about when after Adam, the entity that was created for all the divinity to flow through it, what happened? When Adam knew Eve, they had a son. You see? Now, when Cain killed Abel, and he was cast from the place of God, Cain said, but they will kill me. So that had to be other entities that were brought into being other than those who are described in that particular story. You see where I'm coming from? So it was Elohim in a meditative state that brought about all this. And when I say it was Elohim who brought about all of this, it is us. We are Elohim. That is the reason it is stated very emphatically in the scriptures, not only in the Psalms. I say that ye are gods, but it is repeated by Jesus when he says, I say that ye are gods. And I think that, is that in the 6th chapter? Matthew, the 4th chapter, John. Anyway, he said that I say that ye are gods. And that in itself reiterates what he's talking about, reinforces what I'm trying to help you to see. And the more that this mind became matter or became brain, the more solidified it became, the more limitations we had. And we still have. Because the more enlightened we become, the less limitation we have on how we think, how we speak, what we see, how we respond to each other, and how we move. So in doing this, man also created this thing called gravity. Because gravity and time are actually probably the same. And the reason I say that is because when man began to limit himself by separating from father and mother and seeing himself as separate thoughts from the whole band or the whole matrix of thought, then he became more and more condensed. And the more condensed that he became, the more energy it took for him to remain separate. It takes more energy for you to remain separate than it does for you to become one. Let me give you that in two different examples. One example is that if you get upset with me or I'm with you, it takes more energy for me to stay upset with you and to stay separate from you. Because I'm constantly trying to figure out a way to avoid you. As opposed to allowing my thoughts and my feelings to flow freely. And if I see you, you don't change me. But you don't. I don't put up a defense, or I don't become defensive when you say something to me. It takes more energy to do that. It takes more energy for those two chairs to stay apart than it does for them to come together. That's gravity. So the gravity is what keeps that chair where it is, and the one makes sure where it is. But if you were to take those two chairs and move one down to New Light Bureau, then it doesn't take as much gravity to keep them apart. Are you following me? So it takes more energy to stay separate. Now, what I'm saying is that in our molecular structure did not change. It did not change from day one up to this point. What changed is the way we formed it. It's the way we shaped it. That's what changed. The body, the thing, this entity that we call body, or actually in Aramaic, a corpse, because it is dead without us. We can live without it, it can't live without us. This corpse thing that we formed is in perpetual motion. Because the atomic structure of our being is in perpetual motion. Nothing is what's motionless, I should say. But it is in perpetual motion, and anything that is in perpetual motion also produces energy, because it's constantly moving. And I believe that it was our thoughts of separateness that began to bring this molecular structure together. And when the sages talked about the sparks being collected, I think it was alluded to this, even if they didn't see it as clearly as I'm trying to put it forth today, that we live in a world now where we are constantly reinforcing this sense of separation or this sense of limitation. Am I making sense?
Yes.
So by doing that, what we actually ended up doing was creating ourselves. And we create this thing called mankind, which really doesn't exist. It simply is an illusion. If that chair is an illusion, if we can see everything else as an illusion, but the real world is the world that we cannot see with our eyes, or that we are not connected to by our five senses, I should say, then, but the sixth sense is the third eye, which is the pineal gland. That's what keeps us connected to the realm, what we call the other realm, which is really the only realm of reality. This place, if this place is an illusion, then everything that we see in this place is also an illusion. So the walls that we see separating from us is also, these bodies that enclose us is also an illusion. It talks about how Elohim put a coat of covering or a coat of skin over man, right? Well, the idea of coat talks about an inner covering. It says an inner covering. So if it's an inner covering, then it's not talking about my clothes being external. So my skin would be internal of my clothes, right? So if it's the skin without my clothes, then what is it? Is an inner covering. What is the covering? What is the inner thing that is covering? The inner covering covers our perception, our concept rather, of what really exists. That's what's covered. That's what buried deep inside of us. And the us that's covered by the skin. So it being an inner covering, then there is a struggle. There's a struggle for this energy to be released. But every time we insist on our separateness, then we further impact this idea of separateness. And we further perpetuate this idea of separateness, and it takes more energy for us to keep that skin in place, or to keep that covering in place, or to keep the concept of who we really are buried deep inside of us than it does for it just to flow freely. And that's evident when we begin to look at children at play. Children at play have a vivid imagination. They just flow freely. But what happens is we educate them and restrict them. Education limits them. And our form of education limits them. It limits their creativity. It limits their ability to interact with each other in a positive way. It limits everything. And it also limits the function of the pineal gland, which is the third eye. The pineal gland attracts and absorbs the light, and it actually distributes light throughout the body. Now, if the body is representative of the spiritual entity, then the pineal gland is actually the connection between what we call the other world, the world of enlightenment, and this world. So it is the equivalent of the spiritual mind in terms of its attractions. Am I making sense? So when we, you can jump in at any time. So when we start talking about becoming one, how do we get to this place where we become one? Or when we start talking about creating a world of peace?
Let me catch up with you.
Okay.
All right, so Elohim created through thoughts, this denser, mind became denser and became brain, which became physical. However, there was something within the mind, within the brain, within the physical, there was a physical representation called the pineal gland, which is still that connection to our origin.
Yes.
Because it attracts light, it distributes light, it has what is, it's similar to the physical eye that does spiritual what the physical eye does.
Right. Now, that's when you're talking about if the eye be single, that's what he's talking about.
The pineal
The
gland.
pineal gland. Now, other religions understand this. And they accept it. They deal with it from that perspective. There are representations of it in all over the world. But we have a sense of, we have such a strong sense of separateness until we don't accept anything that we don't agree with, or that we don't see on our own, or that we don't understand. We have this sense that if it does not fit in my cultural beliefs, then it doesn't exist. Richard.
Well, there's so much stuff that spins out of this, but I mean, we talked about this in one way or another before, I can remember. But this just makes me think, though, is there really nothing in the range that we're aware of Scripture that doesn't in some way address the concept or notion of a third eye? Or is it just that whatever that is, it's in the basement of the Vatican and we're never going to know? I mean, it was there, but we lost any lineage, any ability through generations of someone to pass it on to the others, saying, no, it's there, it's called this. In other words, what I'm saying is, my reaction is that it's, if everything I understand Jesus to be about is true, then it's there somewhere, but very early, maybe in the schism between the Jerusalem church, etc., that either was purposely something, so that it could, even follow the Catholic control structure, etc. But it's hard for me to believe that it's, it's like when I was growing up, you thought, gee, how come the Buddhists had all the great phrases and the great concepts? Well, they start really delving more into what we would call the body of Judeo-Christian literature, either with Paul or whatever. You say, wait a minute, it's there too. But we're just not encouraged to know that, explore that, deal with it. You know what I'm saying? So I just wonder if that concept isn't there somewhere.
The concept is definitely there. Let me back into that by addressing the idea of the Vatican. Post-Constantine Christianity was designed and developed for the single purpose of manipulating man, but bottom line. And everything that everything that alluded to the third eye, or everything that alluded to the connection between a deity and us, or we in the deity, was purposely purged during the Nicene Conference. And if you read the book of Mary, you read Thomas, you read Enoch, you begin to see glimpses of the concept of the third eye. But if you read it in depth and really contemplate what is being said, you see a real pattern there. And these are the things that they found more difficult to manipulate, so they actually pull them out of what we call scriptures. Now, the Vatican itself has all kinds of symbols alluding to the third eye that are very public, but they don't appear to be anything to us. The pine cone on the top of the staff that the Pope carries at times, the pineal gland. The pine cone shaped object that's in the courtyard of the Vatican. There are all kinds of things that allude to the third eye. When you look at the cathedrals throughout Europe, or some in this country, when you look at the spires on the corners of them, they are pine cones. And when you see the engravings on front of the buildings, and many of them, they're pine cones. So the plenty of that is often alluded to, and through, by those who know really what's going on. But again, it was, the idea of Nimrod never died. And what I mean by that is Nimrod was the first one to bring people to himself under the guise of God, believing in God. And Nimrod, if you remember, attempted to build what's called the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel is not a physical tower, it was a spiritual desire to be a deity separate from the Father, separate from Jehovah. And out of Babel came Babylon, out of Babylon came Catholicism. The road is the same. So it has not changed in that men have attempted to use the spiritual to manipulate and to influence or to usurp the free will of the men. And when you began to usurp the free will, what happens is you began to peace becomes a thing of the past in the world. What I mean by that is that when you exert force on man's free will, you cannot expect peace to be the results because the resistance comes. Peace is when you allow free will to exist or to flow as it was designed to flow without being manipulated. Am I making sense? Go ahead.
Sorry about that. My reaction would be to say it more boldly than that. I think I'm sitting here thinking of fusion and fission and physics, and you can't stop that. I don't think you can inhibit free will. You can only distract away from people as being in that last state to allow it to.
And that's exactly why you use the word manipulate.
And that's like that old expression, the devil doesn't make you do sin, he just keeps you confused enough so that you don't know how to do right. Okay?
And that's the manipulation. I think it's more manipulation than inhibiting, because I don't think you can inhibit anybody's free will. Because when you manipulate it, they still have free will. They make the choice they make is the one that you manipulated them into making. So you don't stop it. You just redirect it.
Well, that's my point. By definition, it doesn't operate on that kind of a basis, but it's getting to it. That's the effort. The effort is to keep you from accessing it.
Right.
But by and of itself, it's I suppose you could say a force that cannot be controlled. I don't mean it's out of control. I just mean
it can be manipulated, but not controlled in the sense of control.
I would argue it's not being manipulated. You're being manipulated from accessing.
Same thing.
Okay.
My whole premise is that post-Constantine Christianity manipulates man into believing that God is separate from him and that he cannot be God until he die. When death is, but in the same breath, he's told that Jesus is God and that you can do the same thing that Jesus did, and that you're supposed to believe everything Jesus said. But you can't be God. You will never be God, but you can only be with God when you die. That doesn't make sense to me. Because if I am to be able to do everything that Jesus did, then I'm one with the Father before I die. If I believe everything he said, then I am a God. Because he said, ye are gods. Is it not written that ye are gods? That's what he said. So either what's written is correct or what's manipulated is correct. And I choose to believe what's written is correct as opposed to what's being presented as truth. And I also believe that that the idea of denominational religion is one of the greatest things that separates us. It gives us a sense of separation. Because if I'm a Methodist and you're if I'm a Methodist and you're a Baptist, then it means that I believe that you're wrong, which means that we are separate. So rather than look at whether or not the principles that makes me a Methodist and you're a Baptist are in line with what is written, we choose to write our own dogma. And our own dogma is designed to keep intact what we were born with, and that's a sense of separateness. If I am caught up in my career, then by virtue of me saying that, I'm separating myself from you, because I'm not concerned about who yours. Or even if I am concerned about yours, I still see us as being separate. So, but if I don't see a career, what I actually see is a pathway that brings us to a place of oneness again, as opposed to seeing a career, then I see the journey of the pathway that leads to the journey that makes us one again, in terms of our conceptual acceptance. Am I making sense of what I'm saying? Now, also, I mean, when you look, just look at the principle, look at greed. Greed separates us. The whole concept of capitalism separates us. It causes us to feel, to believe that I got to make it in spite of you. It gives the old concept that, Machiavelli said, power is not given, it's taken. So it gives the idea that I must, in order for me to be powerful, I have to take it. Now, if I got to take it, from whom am I taking it? You see? I'm taking it from you. But I'm not actually taking it from you. I'm manipulating you to the point where you think I am. So now you feel so diminished until you cannot deal with me because you think that I am more powerful than you, which again is separation. Now, if you look at the 8th Psalm, it says that what man thou honor him, thou made him a little of the angels. That scripture says that he diminished himself, Lord than Elohim. So he's Elohim, but he diminished himself by creating this sense of separation, by building these walls of separation around him. That's how we're separate. I mean, that's the reason we're limited in everything that we do. We no matter how deeply we feel like we are not selfish, we are so selfishness is so deeply ingrained in us until it's virtually impossible for us to get beyond that. We don't talk about things like that because one thing is boring to some people, to other people it's not scriptural, and to others we just rather remain where we are, as opposed to thinking beyond what we have been taught to think. But then there are some who say, regardless of what it takes or how boring it may be, this is what we want to do. This is why? Because until we get to the place where we understand that there is no sense of separateness, we can forget the idea of transcending time. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen until our conceptual understanding of who we are diminishes to the point where it actually grows us to being who we really were created to be. Does that make sense? So how do we deal with this thing? When we begin to recognize that the whole of everything we see is a continuum, then we have to begin. Then what we do, we begin to travel in reverse, as opposed to moving further and further away. We begin to reverse the journey, our journey. When we think about, I'll tell you, give you an example of what I'm saying. Last month, what's it this month? This month. There seems to have been so many full moons The full moon lasted for so long. You know what I'm saying? And the moon was closer, depending on things that were transpiring in terms of thoughts. So, how do we deal with that? How do we deal with that? How do we reconcile that with our beliefs? Because according to science, full moons come as a set pattern. But we've seen more than we have in the past. So how do we reconcile that?
What do you mean? I mean,
how do we address that? How do we justify that? What makes that happen? What is making that happen? It's more specific than that, I do believe.
That's something to do with the feminine?
Yes, exactly.
So it's a cleansing process taking place.
Or what?
the physical and specific reflection is happening in spiritual. Light is flooding in because of the alignment of masculine and physical images, alignment of thought with light. And physical has to reflect the spiritual reality.
With us not really being human, and the only way that we created all of that we consider to be reality anyways with our thoughts and feelings. So everything we see is just a reflection of what we're actually constantly creating with our thoughts and our feelings.
So let's take all this and put it together. The moon is recognizing what's taking place. And what's taking place is a recognition of the feminine for what it is, as opposed to diminishing it, it is being elevated. And the elevation of the feminine is reflected in how you relate to the feminine in your presence. And in your presence is not necessarily, or not only the female, or the woman in your presence, it's also the feminine in you.
Which would go back to the 99%, and the only thing that is the recognition of awareness of the feminine within individuals.
Yes. Do you understand what he's saying? The 99%.
The only thing the 99% is that part of themselves that was oppressed and was not recognized, and now all of a sudden it's recognized in the awakening of themselves. And in the awakening of that part of yourselves, because all of us have both male and female attributes within ourselves, or I would say our soul is made of that anyway. That's what the awakening is. That is that awareness all of a sudden. All of us more so waking up.
It's recognizing the light for what it is.
And getting balance.
Yes.
I think I resonate with that. And the reason those participating resist this, you want to call it movement, this action being structured and formed, is because if you're in a process of self-discovery, you can go one of two ways. You can feel like you discovered it while on a purple robe in an old church, as we talked about before, or you can reflect and allow it to mature in you. So I think this movement resists structurization and leadership out of a sense that there's not a maturity yet to know where it should go. Well, again, I would agree that this is fundamentally people saying, I suppose if you use the language, the traditional male-dominated, testosterone-driven way of seeing things doesn't get us to where we want to go. So this has to be a new way, you know, I'm not saying it's too immature, and I think the intelligent part of it is saying, don't push us to be so formal so quickly. You know, because in the beginning, people say, what do you want, why are you doing this? These just a bunch of foolish people out there doing nothing.
And that's only looking at it from an intellectual standpoint, that it has, yes.
Structure, which wants, yeah, because then you know how to hack it, deal with it,
Manipulate it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say one of the reasons they can't have like a leader in the sense that other movements have leaders is because A, they can manipulate it, and B, it has to remain open for
It's an open movement.
for influence from the other dimensions.
Yeah.
As long as it does not have set parameters, then it's existing in the present, in the now, to be whatever it needs to be at that particular moment. It is very flexible.
Yeah, I am. I am what you need me to be when you need me to be.
Well, I think if in a meditative state, the moment you tell yourself, I'm meditating, and you translate what it is you're feeling, you're out of that state. So this is sort of a movement that's trying to stay in that sort of state, you know what I mean? And it's self-interest to understand, the more you can resist characterizing what it's all about, the better the chance it has to mature and be stronger and have more influence.
The idea of what we,
That's right. Religious structure.
so actually, what the 99% thing is representative of is the concept of free will, which implies that we're able to cause something without being caused by something. We can make something happen without something making us happen.
And I guess free will,
Those people are not created by anyone, but they're causing things to happen. With the movement, I mean.
so free will is the ability to act upon your higher self.
Of making choices without force,
Yeah.
or manipulation for that matter.
But I'm saying the challenge is to progress into that state to allow it to, I guess you could say, more take over or mature. So you have everybody on the sidelines, just to go back to the 99 thing, saying, okay, when are you going to get organized? When are we going to be able to find this? We're getting nervous that this thing continues without structure, because it's obliging us to maybe start to ask ourselves questions we're not comfortable to ask.
Well, I think that's an intellectual part of it, but I also think that the reason we are where we are in terms of individual matter, see ourselves this way, it is simply because our desire for separation is what condenses thought to what we call matter. If I think that I am better than Barbara, or I think that I can give her something that she does not possess, then that in itself creates separation. But if I see Barbara as me, then I'm not trying to give her something that she doesn't have. If I see her as me, then I become reflective of who she is to her, and she sees that if she chooses to. Am I making sense?
And so what's so scary, I think, that we're just talking about the movement itself. There's not the scary part is not having some defined objective that you can pick apart and manipulate and condense and put your own, those people want to manipulate, put your own thoughts into it and make it and shape it into what they want it to be specifically. And that's reflective of what's going on inside of us as well.
Suppose for a moment that we created the 99% movement. If we desire to see ourselves as one, right? That in itself diminishes separation, doesn't it? So, it takes more energy to separate than it does to come together. So if you desire to see the unicity of us all, then that 99% appears not to have direction. It becomes reflective of a desire to think as one and to move as one entity, even though there are those who are saying, but you're in it for different reasons. No, you're not. All the reasons are the same. Regardless of how you describe them, they are the same. And the reason is not known to the people who are, it's not necessarily known to the people who are involved in it, because they only see natural, earthly, physical reasons, or reasons that can be attributed to one of the five senses or multiple senses. You understand what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
But suppose for a moment that this is more representative of the diminished capacity of arrogance and greed and racism and all these other things, which are all these isms which have which has a shell effect around each of them that separates us into groups. So what happens is the multiple thoughts that appear to be the reason they are there is actually representative of one mind with different thoughts, which is one entity.
And that's the scary part.
That's the
you
scary
put a
part.
boundary around it. And once you put a boundary around it, you begin to limit it, you begin to set limitations, you begin to be able to label it, and that's what's scary about it. For those folk who want the physical power to be able to do that.
So suppose for a moment, what we are actually seeing is what we have determined to be the fall of man in reverse.
I mean, it is. It's totally going against the whole idea of what the 99% embody is oneness and everyone working together. It goes totally against the opposite of that, which is capitalism, which is reminiscence of the fall of man.
Look at what happened. What's happening? Look at the tremendous amount of force that's being exerted to pull them apart. It takes more force to be separate than it does to be united. Look at the amount of force that's being that they're using to pull them apart. But look at how easy it appears to be for them to remain as one. The whole movement of the 60s was because people became one thought. And regardless of what happened, that's who they were. But when they began to project leaders, then the leader became their thought. And they were able to kill the whole movement by killing the thought. But now, it is different.
It's necessarily separated. Necessarily separated behind the directions that those the leadership started to take. So instead of having this amorphous mass of undefined, like now, we don't want to do it this way anymore. And then you start having people tell you, let's do it this way, this way, and that's when it starts to go in different directions and have certain followers go this way, and that's how that thing, before it's mature enough, comes apart. That's my sense of what happened in the 60s. That's what people are waiting for now. They're waiting for this thing to come apart.
And they are, because what they don't recognize is that this sense of separation is coming to an end. Because separation is individual goal orientation. You know, each individual has a different goal in mind. That's what creates the sense of separation. But if your goal and if your goal is stated differently than mine, but we move in the same direction because we recognize that we are one thought, then all of a sudden it is not so easy to be a war between us. Think about it this way. Out of all of the Occupy movements around the world, not the country, the world, out of all of them around the world, most of the people involved in the different portions of the world don't even speak the same language, but they are moving in the same direction. Nobody sent out a memo saying this is how we're going to do it. So what's happening here? There is a sense of the 99%. If you look at the 99% from the Kabbalistic perspective, we only use 1% of who we are. We only recognize 1% of who we are, and the 99% is unrecognized. But if that 99% is beginning to recognize the energy that it is created to be, and it already has the 1%, which is the physical. So now the 99% connects with the 1%. All of a sudden, it becomes a effortless movement that is impossible to stop because it's simply a ball of energy as opposed to a ball of conflictions or different ideas. They begin to see all our ideas are the same. Though we state them differently, the objective is the same. Am I making understand what I'm saying? So we have a body being built based upon a homogeneous relationship as opposed to an individualistic connection. Because during the 60s, there were so many splinter groups. There were the Pan-Africanists, there were the Pan-African Nationalists, there were the SPLC, there was so all these groups, and every effort that was put out there to try to bring them together never succeeded. But right now, the reason it didn't is because it was an effort for men to control energy, as opposed to it growing from the base up.
Well, I think also 60 came from a place where so many of these groups, as you might want to call them, were so far apart culturally, and that's not the case anymore.
And I don't.
There is a more common thread. I mean, you could have Black Picture Movement saying we're dealing with very concrete things. You guys are talking about touchy-feely, lovely, undefined stuff. Two different worlds. That's the point. I think now people who are participating understand the commonness between them. I think this is one of the great struggles that Martin Luther King had, and in the latter part of his life, that Malcolm X started to see the commonness.
But see, I think that is not because culture is diminished, but it's because culture is transcendent. Because culture in itself is a natural phenomenon, as opposed to spiritual.
Maybe it is just our arguments like that, but my sense is today's body that makes up a lot of the occupied people are coming from a more homogeneous common, or a sense that they're more similar to each other. So there's a communication there already that opens up more. In the 60s, it was, who are you and what are you all about? And some of that unitedness was artificial, because no one really understood the world that the other one was coming from.
I do.
But the Occupy movement is more than just here now. The issue is in the 60s, it was some groups perhaps in this one country, but this movement now is worldwide.
But
and so the cultural differences are different.
So they transcend it.
But everything I've read in the last 20 years says the whole idea of globalization, the whole idea of capital, whatever working capitalism, working overseas, is to make a commonness out of man. And if in fact that's been succeeding, the paradox is that that's actually given a more solid base for this movement. Because there's less difference to struggle past. You know what I'm trying to say?
So in other
But it's
words,
not a physical thing, though. That's the argument I'm making, that it's more than just what you read, which tries to contain that into a physical kind of way to look at it. It's a spiritual thing that's transcended that.
It may have started out in the physical, but it just transcended
What I'm
beyond that.
trying to argue is that's made that more possible on our base.
Well, what's possible, what is happening now is it's not that they couldn't focus on it. They could find just as much difference now as they did back then. It's just that their intention is different.
they have
I would
two.
argue that. I would argue that's the struggle. It's harder. It's going to be harder. They're going to find more extreme ways to try to divide the group. But my point is, the group has more of a sense of unity and oneness because they're coming from that base where there's that perception among themselves. In the 60s, okay, I thought I was, black, white, everybody was all the same. Then you got in the same room and 5 minutes realized, oh, hell no. Right? And then that made it harder. And then you had all that energy saying, no, we got to go this way. I don't feel that now.
Well, you would have to say that the only difference is if that 99% has chosen to not see themselves separate. I mean, you have in Egypt, you have Muslims and Christians fighting right beside each other for their freedom, sticking up for one another. So it's just that they have decided not to see that separateness, and they actually see that oneness now. That's the only difference.
And I guess to be fair, the 60s didn't happen in 6 months. We're talking about a number of years.
And see, I think also there are major differences, but I think it has its roots. The seed of it may have been there. And in the 60s, free will was really manipulated. And there were tremendous walls between groups that separated them. And it was purposely done because there were some groups who were funded through universities, like Student Organization Black Unity, got funds from universities, Ford Foundation. There were other groups that were funded by government. There were other groups that were not funded at all. So the money was used to separate them, to create that sense of not only separation, but what you call it, superiority. It's some group that have money to do things. The whole SCLC thing was co-opted. It was co-opted by corporate money. And once it got co-opted, then the whole direction of it began to change. And then King began to push it back into another direction, and that's when it got killed. So the roots of it may have been there, but now it's something totally different. It's not about money.
Okay.
It's not about voter registration. It's not about organizing communities. It's not about feeding the poor. It's not about clothing anybody. It's not about any of that. And to be quite frank with you, the people who are involved, if you were to ask them, what is this about? If you ask 10 of them, then you get 10 different answers. Because they don't really recognize what it's about. The one thing it is about is recognizing that we are not separate entities. And they don't see that. Just because you spearhead the movement, it doesn't mean that you recognize what you're actually doing or what you're actually creating.
But wouldn't the common thread still be manipulation?
What do you mean?
Thread.
The common catalyst for
Them coming together?
not being manipulated. That's what.
Yeah, that's it. And the whole,
If you look at all the world governments, whether I'm talking about
we got to stop saying people. This the people the entities that we call people who are in these parts are not, we got to stop seeing them as people. And that may sound crazy, but will we continue to be mere humans? Mere men? Is that not what they say talks about? We got to stop seeing them as that and see them as a representative of thoughts. And the number of thoughts that you can have in your mind or your head is represented in these different places around the world. Are you with me? So these are different thoughts that are being represented, and thoughts are what? Energy. So when you bring these energies together, I'm not talking about bringing them together in terms of one geographical location. I'm talking about bringing them together in terms of being directed toward a common goal or journey. And the commonality of it is to unravel the seam of these things that separates us, or that appears to separate us. Greed, racism, feminism, you see, sexism, all these things.
No, what you're describing, we talk about third eye, what you're describing is what they call chakras. When you get chakras, when you get energy moving in one direction for a common cause, when all the energy becomes one. So it does, the physical being in one location has nothing to do with geographical areas. It's all the energy with the same mindset, moving in the same direction.
And that's exactly what we're looking at. That this is not about a movement in the sense that we have experienced, probably 2 or 3 years more in the 60s than anybody in this room. This is not about that at all. This is something much different.
That's my point. That's why looking back, and it's dangerous to look back because you can be selective. And I know I'm expressing it in my, like, this is kind of an intellectual way, but hey, that's one thing. But I'm saying that's why, and some of us are still alive and remember that earlier experience, and we're frustrated by how it became frustrated. And sooner or later, my sense is I need to more physically participate in this in some way, because this to me has a better shot at completing what that earlier attempt was. You know what I mean? Because, as I was trying to say, the people who are coming together aren't allowing themselves, although it's a very young energy, to be separated by what in our generation were clear, real, harsh separations. I mean, a white middle-class kid like me could be frustrated. But I'm talking to a black guy coming out of a project who's not frustrated. He's had to live with real issues related to that, second class, blah, blah, blah. So either he left those behind, or sooner or later they came out and had to deal with them. And I think that's what was the risk back then, and that's what the hope is for this group. So the longer that this momentum stays undefined and permeates where it wants to permeate, the better. I'm saying it's analogous to having that nirvana experience in meditation and being smart enough not to try to find it. And just rest in it until you feel confident. You're affected by it, whatever the right word is. You know what I'm saying?
And that is the reason that it has to remain homogeneous. It has to. Now, how do you direct that? How do you direct that kind of energy when it refuses to allow it to be directed? That's what I'm talking about when I talk about the idea of separation creating limitations. If we can understand that there is no such thing as separation, that all of us are the thoughts that are represented there in those parts of the world. That's who we are. And the battle is not for Egypt to be free of Mubarak, or for this country to cease being manipulated by corporations. That's not the battle. That's what appears to be the battle. The battle is becoming one with the Father. That's what the goal is. That's what the journey is, but it's not realized. Now, you can call it a boom. you can call it Yahweh, whatever you want to call it, is being connected to, if you want to call it the cause, it doesn't matter, the source of life. This is what this is all about. There is something wrong in here. And people began to recognize there's something wrong. And the thing that's wrong in here, I don't know how to quite put my finger on it. But these are the things that we are going to do. And in doing these things, we are hopefully going to create enough energy surrounding these things to change the direction of mankind. When no one really knows what direction that should be. However, I say that by virtue of understanding that it is energy moving in a given direction, then it is easier to direct the energy to the energy. In other words, the sparks back to the light. So the spark can be drawn with the light, thus we will begin to see that this whole concept of mankind is an illusion. And the reality of it is that we are light that have chosen to see ourselves as being separate, and we are a kind of, what's that little thing, a kaleidoscope. You know, it's that thing that you cut into little pieces, and each piece has a hole on it. Hologram, yeah. I know the one with hologram. I can't think what I'm talking. So all of us are holograms of the whole. Am you with me? We're all holograms because we have the same thoughts. But when you put the whole hologram together again, then it is more easily seen, which means that it is more easily, that it has greater power, has greater strength. So our holographic nature is drawing us back to this place where these pieces are put together. So we don't have to be concerned about a homogeneous relationship, because homogeneous in itself talks about separateness. Separate entities coming together. So it's no longer homogeneous, it is one. And that is the reason Elohim talks about one yet many. One yet many what? One entity but many thoughts. And the many thoughts have separated based upon its desire to separate. Based upon its desire to create on its own. Based upon its desire to see itself as a unit that is capable of moving in any direction it chooses to move in, when in actuality it is not. By virtue of our desire to be separate, we're limiting ourselves in terms of direction and movement. That's the limitation. The things, the bodies that we see, limit what we see. Because when you really think about it, in terms of life itself, these bodies that we have created cannot live without us. But we can live without them. Are you with me? So, if we can live without them, and if we are one, then we must be still connected. And what is it that connects us? It's the thing that we call energy. That's what connects us. This is light. That's what connects us. And if we can recognize that connection has only been diminished in our thoughts and not in reality, that begins to change the whole way we see things. All of a sudden, your job is not so important anymore. All of a sudden, you begin to see that this idea of correction is simply to move energy in the direction of the source of all life. It is to move life back to its source. You begin to see that the reason you are where you are in terms of where you live, the family you're in, the job that you have, all these things are designed to move you in a direction that brings you back to the source. Even if you don't recognize it, that's what's happening. So sometimes people are able to do that in the case of Enoch and in one life, or however many he had to live to do it. But there are others who have to be reincarnated into different families, different cultures, in order to make this happen, in order to bring it into being. And that's what Jesus was talking about. Who did you say, who did he say, I the Son of Man now? And then they began to talk about Elijah and Isaiah and all those other folks. That's reincarnation. So when we start talking about that, when we talk about reincarnation, we're not talking about Steve being reincarnated as Evelyn. We're not talking about that. In terms of his name being Steve, we're talking about the personality, the thought, the attitudes, so that they can be converted into what they were supposed to be from the beginning, before we made this decision to be separate. Think for a moment. Think for a moment. If everything that we're talking about is true, and if the scriptures are true, then we have never left the place of creation. We're still in the place of creation. But we have to convince ourselves, because our desire to separate from father and mother. Father and mother is not a woman sitting there with the woman, a man there with the penis. That's not father and mother. Father and mother is a concept. And the womb is not a physical thing. Womb is a concept out of which things come. I was the other night, I was thinking about something, and I don't even know what I was thinking about. Well, I saw something. I saw the sheep, the bee, his house. And what I saw with the sheep was the sheep out of Elohim. I saw all of them move back into the house. That becomes the womb. Everything goes back into beginning. Everything goes back into bed. Are you with me? Yeah. Everything goes back into bed. Why? The reason everything goes back into bed is because there are only really two entities, and the only reason there's two entities is because one chose to be separate. It's bed and olive. Those are the only two entities. Everything goes back into bed. And bed becomes one with olive. Are you with me? Am I making sense? So if you can see a retraction, if you can see this is being bed, and all the letters go back into bed, and bed becomes one with olive. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what are we saying here? The objective is for us to embrace this sense of oneness, to embrace this idea that not only am I my brother's keeper, my brother's protector, hedge around my brother, I am my brother. And my brother's me. And whatever it takes to bring us to this place where we enter the womb of beginning, then that is necessary. That's what Jesus was talking about when he was talking to Nicodemus. You have to enter the womb of beginning. This is not for one man to enter the womb of beginning. This is for us, who we call mankind, to enter the womb of beginning. And if one man can do it, all men can do it. So what are we saying here? The groundwork was not laid just by Jesus. He wasn't the first person to do that. Enoch became one with the light. Didn't he? Elijah became one with the light. So there's opportunity to do that. But there has to come a point when it reaches critical mass. And none of us know what that is in terms of numbers. Because it's not in terms of numbers, I believe it's in terms critical mass is representative more of the depth of your acceptance of who you are, as opposed to who you created yourself to be. All these images that we create ourselves, all these things that we lay out there for our kids to do and what we want them to be, are the things that really perpetuate separation. Does that make sense? Any questions? Okay, y'all choose.
Question about the movement. Kind of brings, anyway, question is, the people that died in the civil rights movement, then immediately they are reincarnated to be in the Occupy Wall Street to break forth.
It will not surprise me. It will not surprise me.
Okay, well, I have more of a comment than a question. And it's kind of along the same lines as Myers. But what I'm seeing, what I'm hearing you say is, when you were talking about reincarnation, what I'm seeing is those souls or entities who have come across generations, they've been reincarnated and whatever. And now we've come to a point where they have this oneness because they've been through those many lives and made the corrections that they need to make. But now they are at a point where, even though they don't realize it physically, they realize they've come to the point of that critical mass.
Yes, okay.
In thought.
Yeah.
And they don't see it physically, but it resonates deep inside them.
You know what you just said?
Yeah.
You understand the power of what you just said?
But it just resonates deep inside them. So they can be one and they can transcend culture because they've lived those lives across cultures.
So we're the generation. And when I say we're the generation, I don't mean generation in terms of chronological age. I'm talking about generation in terms of spiritual awareness, etc. Right? So we're the generation who have the opportunity to bring about tremendous change for the whole of everything that exists. And I say that purposely without limiting it to mankind. Because mankind, to me, does not exist. It's an illusion.
But anyway, that's how I see they've transcended those cultures because they've lived those lives. They've lived across cultures up to this point.
And we limit our movement in that direction by the shackles we put on ourselves through racism, through as I said, denominationalism, through labeling. Not only things, but labeling relationships in terms of group and individuals. I can't deal with you because. No, that's the reason you need to deal with me. Regardless of what.
But I see that the movement sees that those kinds of things don't really hold water anymore.
And I don't think they see it as clearly as you do. They feel it. I think internally, they sense it. Yeah, they feel it. But and again, I say as I said before when Nick and I were talking that we have to guide this energy. And the way we do that is by allowing it to flow. We can't sit there and label the direction that it needs to go in because we're no different than those who don't know what the direction is going in. We just allow it to flow. And what happens is like, I can't decide what I want to teach word for word verbatim. I have to allow it to flow. Because if I allow the energy to flow and I translate that energy into words, then the people who I'm standing in front of or sitting in front of, who I'm facilitating, these people will begin to receive what they need. You understand what I'm saying? But if I sit down and write out a lesson plan, now I'm giving you what I assume you need, which is another form of manipulation.
However, through free will, we can choose to receive.
Yes.
Well, yeah, but don't be so hard on yourself, because you're also creating an opportunity if you allow,
I'm sorry.
if you allow interaction, discussion, or reaction to what you say, then that's, what you're saying isn't manipulative so much as catalytic. It's just, if you give a very didactic lecture on Wednesday night in Bible study, and then everybody has to go home, that's not exactly the same thing. So, but we all need sometimes seeds around which to help organize thoughts and feelings. So somebody gets to play that.
And that goes back to I'm talking about what resonates. You know, when it's not manipulation, you know it. You know it. And all of us have been and are manipulated to some degree, constantly. But we have to, I think, be not just mindful, but be extremely careful about how we talk to people about doing things or suggesting to them what they, you know what I'm saying? So we don't manipulate them. It's like the children. You don't want to tell your children what to be, because you don't get up there and go to class. You know, you kind of guide them and help them to flow into the different personalities that they represent. Because none of us represent the same thought. None of us. It's the different sequences, just like DNA, the different sequences. Am I making sense?
Yes.
So
I think we talked about it one time but where I see it though is when it is manipulation, you either are bewitched to fall into it, or you rebel against it.
right.
But when it is conviction, you may struggle, but you don't. But you make the choice to either move forward or discount.
Right.
So it's a choice you make when it's conviction.
And that's what that struggle represents. That struggle represents what I was talking about when I said that the more dense we become, we end up creating gravity and time/time.
Yeah, it's
So
a choice
it's-
between hanging on to the gravity and
Yes.
time or moving toward the light.
That's it. That's it. And it's much easier, we find, once we begin to move towards light, we find it's much easier to let go and move towards it than it is to hold on to. But we don't know that because we're so accustomed to holding on to it. So it feels good, it feels comfortable, it feels like the right thing until you let go. And when you move into it, then you begin to see it. But if you're not careful, familiar energy will draw you right back to where you were. You see that?
Yes.
If you're not careful. Familiar energy will draw you right back to where you were. So it's a necessity that not only that you remind what we call ourselves in terms of talking to self, but you also are reminded by myself through the Bible, or reminded by myself through Sheldon. You see, that's who I am. And the reason it is the things that are brought forth, the reason it resonates so clearly is because it is actually me who's saying it as well. It's just coming from what seems to be another body. Did I see your hand? Okay, but then so if we look at the whole thing that we call the continuum, then we will see that light becomes matter. Can you see that? The will becomes force. Will is free and fluid. But the more we manipulate will, the more we see our will being separate from your will, then the more it becomes matter. It becomes a physical decision. Jesus says, not my desires, but yours. Why? Because my desires are based upon the environment that I grew up in. My desires are based upon what I have experienced in this physical body. My desire is to protect this body. That's what my desire is. Because regardless of how we grow, we still have this sense of being overly protective of this entity called the body, because we think that this is what keeps us alive. This is not what keeps us alive. We are what keeps it alive. And the more we say that, and the deeper it should resonate. And when it should resonate at a depth, not to where you become disrespectful of the body, but it resonates to a depth where you recognize the disassociation in terms of the ability to be beyond the body. In terms of what Barbara was talking about earlier when she says that I asked myself, where am I going tonight? In terms of, the dreams, the visions, etc. That kind of disassociation. Kind of disassociation that allows you not to be caught in a series of rules, as opposed to being caught up in the fluidity of light that moves you from matter along this journey to light. And see, from matter to light, see all these different pathways? But they want to the same place. And regardless of how long it takes you to get there, you're going. It just determines about how many times you have to be reincarnated. How long will it take you to make a decision when you get this right? And I can see very clearly what you're saying in terms of coming through so many lives in the past until you begin to recognize. How does that happen? It's because things become clearer. Now, you no longer see through a vast darkness. The veil has been torn. So you begin to see clear. Why do you see clearer? Because with each life there are things that you have corrected. There are things that you have gotten rid of. There are things that you have dealt with. And the more you move out of that, it doesn't mean that every individual or every person who sees themselves as an individual has to see that with that clarity. It doesn't mean that. The reason Jesus was able to remove adversarial thoughts from people called demonic possession, the reason he was able to do that is not because every man had to do that. He did it to show us something. That we are able to help people progress to where we are without them having to go through all of those lives if they choose to. That's what this is all about. This idea of healing the body is not reflective of the need for the body to be healed. It's reflective of man's spirit being healed, of him being able to see that the wounds that he has encountered over the space of time can be healed by him recognizing what his source is, and the source is not his body. So the physical healing is simply to get your attention. That's all. To get your attention and to redirect your thoughts towards the light. Am I making sense? Yes. That's it. Because it doesn't matter about the physical body. It's necessary for the physical body sometimes to be what we call damaged or maimed so as to get your direction changed. So that's what matters. And the whole concept of us wanting our children to be better is reflected in our desire for those who come after us to have a better understanding of the spiritual than what we have. What we have done is individualized it and made it that I want my child to be a doctor because I couldn't, or I want my child to be successful, however we define that. You understand what I'm saying? Yes. So it matters not whether your child swings on the back of a trash truck or whether your child sits at the head of a corporation. What matters is where's your child's heart? Where's his mind? Where's his thoughts? That's what matters. That's what really, really matters. Because I remember when Greg first told me that they were going to do this construction company thing. The first thing that went through my mind was, I'll be there. So we go through all of this. For him to get a degree in chemistry, master's in education, and you go, do what? How come you didn't be an architect? Get it done on me. That's not what it's about. What it is about is where is his heart. And then something else dawned on me. I was the one who introduced him to construction. I'm the one who taught him to love it. When we remodeled the house, he worked with me side by side. And then I taught him stuff. You see where I'm coming from? Yeah. So it was me teaching him. But in the end, I wanted to blame him as opposed to recognizing it's not what you do, it's who you are. Isn't it?
Yes.
It is who you are. Now, why did I think that about construction versus thing with the chemistry stuff? It's because I felt like if you wanted to do this, you could have had a 4 or 5 year head start. Coming to high school, get started.
And you could have helped you put another addition on your
I mean, you see what I'm saying? But that's not the point. The pathway that he took leads him to where he is. So, how do we travel this continuum? How do we reverse this thing? And I got to go because of the film today. Too, and I got to pick this up. Brother-in-law died. How do we travel? How do we exit this door that we enter and travel back through the continuum?
Decrease the resistance we put up to the flow, and it will carry us back automatically.
Do you understand what you just said?
And how do we decrease examples of decreased resistance?
Not allow manipulation to do what Jesus said as far as letting people come with their own free will, because if they come with their own free will, what was happening to begin with when they were being manipulated, when going back to what Machiavelli said, they were relinquishing their power. Now as they're awake, they're just beginning to realize that they are power. And according to that, as they realize who they are and realize who they are power, what is taking place with the 99% will take place now, as in they will automatically come to this place of oneness, almost by osmosis, like that will automatically take place, just by them realizing an awareness of who they are. So, in essence,
I get what you just said, but if someone's watching this and listening,
yeah, how do you minimize resistance? Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Mr. Barrow.
The show that gave you a much more eloquent and convoluted statement than Nick said.
Yeah.
I'm not putting.
There.
Yeah,
How do you do that?
Yeah.
You just answer around it.
How do you do that?
One of the ways you stop, you decrease the flow is stop manipulating yourself into getting yourself to believe that you are something you're not. And if you are Elohim, then you have to remove all those ideas about what you are not. And who and what you are will naturally carry you in a particular direction.
Stop playing with yourself in terms of
So how do you get started doing that? That's why that's this phrase of you step out on faith. But still, it all comes down to having the courage to take that step.
And the courage to take that step comes from where? It comes from the struggle is what gives you strength. The courage to make that choice.
This is why people go on the street, because they're exhausted trying to do it the other way.
But guess what?
So now they open the space
if you don't know what your options are, you don't struggle. Because you only see one flow. You see what I'm saying?
It's funny.
Options, you don't struggle.
It's funny because you're basically saying that if you strive for nothing, then you don't fail, so to speak, or you don't have a struggle to arrive at something in particular.
Well, what have we said here for years, one way or another? If you're not making the effort to go after or be something, that's the most important thing, right? To move. If you're not moving from a base of ignorance, what are you going to put in front of yourself to create the tension that gives you an opportunity to change and grow from it? In other words, so you hide under the bed all the time.
But you can't define what you're going after, right?
No, you can't define what you're going after. But you can define what you resist.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, I'm going to throw some examples out there. Okay, Barb, in response to what Nikki Shelton said in her question, right? So how do you do this? When you're presented with an opportunity to be greedy, you resist it. When you're presented with an opportunity to be racist, you resist it. When you are presented with an opportunity to be sexist, you resist it. When you are presented with an opportunity to be holier than thou, and you know what I mean, you resist it. You resist all of these religious garments that have been put upon you, us, I should say. When you have an opportunity to rise above someone at the expense of them, you resist it. When you have an opportunity when you have this sense about yourself of being superior, then you resist that. You deal with that. You recognize what it is. And in other words, you have to be true to who you are. You know if you're greedy. You know if you are resistant, whether you're resisting the sense of superiority. You know that in yourself. So is it that your education makes you feel like you're superior to someone? Those things that happen in our lives that usually embarrass us, or the things that hurt us, or the things that we need in order for us to diminish this high of self, this sense of pride that we have about ourselves, that we are above this. The only reason something embarrasses you is because you feel you're above it. So those are the kind of practical things that we resist. We resist the idea of intellectualizing everything. We resist the dogma of religion, regardless of where it came from. You got it? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So
and I guess what I'm saying is, why I'm saying that is because regardless of whether this illusion is an illusion or not, there are people who are still attached to the concreteness of the illusion,
right,
that have to be given those examples of what does it mean to not be tied to physical. Greediness, okay, don't be greedy. That's how you free yourself of that.
I was speaking with a man this morning. I stopped on the way in at the car wash, and this guy was there. And I was speaking with him while we were waiting for our cars to be completed. And during the course of the discussion, he said to me that he had moved from a particular church in Columbia to one of the Chapin because of his daughter. And he went on to explain that his daughter came to him from Sunday school one Sunday and said to him, "Dad, I really would like to be in church with, people who I go to school with or who I see daily." And he said it dawned on him that he was pulling her into the midst of strangers, and her focus was on what she should have been. So he said that he decided to move from the church. That's not what happened. What happened was, he said that at the time I was the chaplain and no one knows the church. So he had to diminish himself in that capacity in order to bring what was needed at that time. You see what I'm talking about?
Yes.
I know why there may be a religious saying. It's okay. The example, the point is what I'm trying to make. there are things that you may hold dear to that you have to give up in order for you to be who you are destined to be. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Question. Question. You don't know all this, first olive. Okay. I don't even know how to sum up what we talked about today. I mentioned earlier. Go ahead.
I was just saying, does anyone have any questions about how? Because we always say something like, don't be greedy, don't be lustful or whatever, but how that decreases your resistance to as well?
This is an example.
I think something can give me great pleasure. So let's say this pencil. This pencil will give me great pleasure if I hold it, own it, or whatever. In the conditions that I thought I am imposing something onto reality that does not actually exist. It is something that I have created and projected out into what I perceive to be separate from me. So when you create that thought, or you give in to that temptation, or you do anything like that, what you are doing is throwing up a wall between your experience of yourself and what your actual self is. So when you remove those walls, when you are presented with an opportunity to put your ego out there and to impose it onto reality, to be greedy, to
Arrogance, whatever.
yeah, whatever. When you don't do that, you are tearing down that wall between who you think you are and who you actually are. And it is amorphous and very difficult to define and impossible to put your finger on in the beginning. The more you tear down those walls, the more you'll be able to move with the flow that is trying to get to you and move through you naturally. And it's not ever a case that you'll be able to define it, but you will allow it to define you. And it will express itself through you as you think you are now, as they draw close together.
Now, the reason you can't find you is because everything you see, everything we see it in the eyes of the illusion. And the way we learn to do that is by recognizing something else. There's no such thing as real self. It does not exist. It's just an illusion. The Lord self is an illusion that we have created and called it mankind. The Lord self is what we have created. It is the very thing that diminishes us that Psalms were about. That thing we call Lord self is the thing that diminishes us.
We're self-profiling.
Yeah. Yeah. It has diminished this, what we call the Lord self, has diminished us from who we are. I say that you are Elohim. But you have diminished yourself beneath that. And that is the reason it was necessary for the manipulators to reword it. When it was translated into Greek and into the English. If you go back to the Hebrew, it says to be diminished beneath Elohim. That's what it says. So the acceptance of the Lord self is accepting the state that you have been diminished, that you've diminished yourself to. The state that you seek to, that you say you want to escape.
So are you saying I created and we created a kingdom?
No. I'm saying that we kingdom of the principles of God, right?
Yeah.
So what we have done, we have created our own kingdom separate from the kingdom that exists.
Okay.
That's why he says the kingdom is where?
You.
Yes. So it's there, but we can manipulate it.
Okay, I got you.
Okay. So each of us have our own kingdom. And we talk about you create our own world, living in your own world.
Yeah.
That's all. You cannot live in your own world and not have an effect on everyone else because we are the same person. There is no such thing as a separateness. And the more we bring feminine and masculine energy together, the more we impose upon what we call mankind the reality of oneness. Does that make sense?
Yes.
The more we bring them together, we have to continually elevate the feminine. That's why the women keeps enlarging or appearing that way. We have to continue to do that.
I don't know, I get again and again struck from, and it's the way I see it, characterized. And I don't get how one of my first remembrances of my association with any structured religion was to talk about the fall. When you talk about the fall of man, and that's so deeply ingrained in somebody, everything about your life is trying to get back to where you are. Until you reach, if you hope, a point of enlightenment where you realize you never left. That's why I say, sarcastically, facetiously, whatever it is, provocatively, I refuse to believe we ever left the garden. But we're taught that. So you're taught you're in a wilderness, not that you suddenly perceive the perfection and the safety and the love environment in a different way. No, you're taught you're outside. So right from the beginning, you have a fundamental divide placed in you, separate concept placed in you. And you know, it's not natural to little children to think that way. So that's, then you spend your life getting away from it, negating that, coming back, whatever the word is, the verb is. It just seems to me why, the question I ask is, why would anybody think that's what you want to teach somebody?
People teach what they've been taught without thinking about what they've been taught.
Well, this is where those companies,
That's exactly what it is. I mean, when we really think about it, that's why I make that distinction. See, we have to see the scriptures through the eyes of the ancients, as opposed to the eyes of the neo-Christians. And I'm talking about the post-Constantine Christians. We have to see the scripture the way that the people who wrote them saw. We have to see it through Arabic eyes. We have to see it through Hebrew eyes. We have to see it through Arabic eyes. We have to see it through the eyes of those in the East who wrote this. Because what they wrote and what we see through the Eastern mind are totally different. I'm still Western mind. They're totally different. Totally different. Sheldon?
Only thing I was thinking is this. What we teach and what we talk about truth is considered as new age thinking, when actually it's just original and own thinking as far as it being beginning.
Absolutely. I listened to a man. We were in Dublin, Georgia for Thanksgiving, and I had got parking pick up at my home, and I turned the radio on, and this guy. I was on one of my radio stations, but there's the station, one of our radio stations. And this guy was preaching, and he was railing against those who believe that you need more in Jesus. And what he said was, when Mother would ask concerning the saints, St. Paul, St. Peter, etc., he said, just give them Jesus. And he said, you don't need the Pope, just give them Jesus. And I'm sitting there thinking as he went on. That's self-debasing without him knowing it. That's self-destructive without him knowing it. It's suicide without him knowing it. Because the very thing that he was preaching against is the root of who he is. Mm-hmm. Because the things that he taught were exactly the same things that comes out of the dogma of Catholicism. Post-Constantine Christianity is nothing but Catholic dogma. It's a Catholic interpretation of the scriptures. and people got so caught up into the way they have been taught to think, as opposed to the way they should think. And when I say the way they should think, I'm talking about thinking for themselves. To the point where one of the things he said was, if you want to know the truth, you will stay away from everything except the King James Bible. That is one of the most ignorant statements that anyone can make. Don't go to the original text, stick with King James. Why? Because only the English can translate it the way it should be said in the beginning. That's crazy. You see? So it's the whole basis of colonialism. You're exactly right. So we have to, and to be quite frank with you, Richard, just because a physical presence is not there, it doesn't mean that you've been decolonized. Decolonized. Just because the physical presence is not there. The colonization is a mental thing. And the reason we as a people are more apt to accept what the Southern Baptists say is because the master is always right. Our minds are still colonized. Look at our education system. Look at how we think about each other. Look at how we look to see the Creator. All of it comes from the roots in Catholicism with the passage through the slavery process and the colonization process. The whole thing. Okay. As I said, I had to get out of here. We did the brother-in-law transition, and actually I didn't know I was going to be here at all. I called Barney Sheldon. And happy that I'm able to be here. So I want you to think about it, and we'll see where we're going next week. Sheldon? Yes, sir. You can go ahead and, well, let's get this first. And I think that those who are on should stay, remain until after we get dismissed from this place.
The light of the truth of the light. Continue unfettered, unbound in us as a whole and in us as one.